Hi, I'm Paul Edwards, author of the independently published Mourner's Woods book series, and first and foremost, a monster kid. And tonight I'm reading Mad Monsters Magazine, issue number 1 from 1962. And I thought some of you might be interested in looking at this magazine with me page by page, just in case you don't have your own copy of Mad Monsters Magazine, issue number 1 from 1962. And together we can see what vintage monster goodness there is in here. All right, fellow monster kids, are you ready? I've removed Mad Monsters Magazine, issue number 1, from its protective plastic, and we're ready to dive into it. And of course, first we want to look at the cover. Now remember, this magazine is from 1962, so it's quite old. You can barely make out the cover price, but the cover price is 35 cents. And the condition of this magazine is not great. There's a couple of problems on the front cover, and as you'll see later, there's problems on the back cover. But defects like that are what make it affordable, because if you get one in pristine condition, it's quite a steep price. So let's see what we get in Mad Monsters Magazine, issue number 1 from 1962. Exclusive, Conga, a picture-by-picture preview. That's as you might guess from the name, a movie about a gigantic ape. St. George and the Seven Curses. Sometimes in older monster magazines like this, you'll see a movie and you're like, how come I've never heard of that? I thought I knew these movies pretty well. A lot of the times it's because the same movie has more than one title. You probably are familiar with St. George and the Seven Curses under the title The Magic Sword. That is, if you're interested in a magazine like this in the first place, you're probably familiar with that movie. But sometimes the title isn't settled, or it's released in a different market under different titles at the time of publication. You don't know exactly what it's going to be called, so you end up with something like this. Reptilicus, the evil creature from a time long dead. Okay, monsters, ghouls, and I'm pretty sure that's fiends, although it's all jacked up. And a nice werewolf on the cover. Okay, so we're off to a promising start. Let's see what we get here. The Ace of Monsters, Boris Karloff as Frankenstein's monster. Now, 1962 was the year of this magazine. So this was the first wave of monster kids. Kids that were growing up seeing older horror movies, like movies from the 30s and 40s, on late night television, shock theater packages. And it was the first wave of kids that had access to any kind of merchandise for monsters, figures, toys, puzzles, pictures of monsters. So this was for the kids who were getting in on the ground floor of the monster boom in the 1960s. You could send away to get glossy photographs of your favorite monsters. All right, all of these look pretty good. And remember, being 1962, this might be the only way you could get a picture of your favorite monsters, because you could hardly print them off, the internet or anything, unless you happen to have a book on older films that you were willing to cut up to get pictures out of. This was about your only resource for monster pictures. And $1 for all 6, that was a pretty good price if you were a monster kid. You could also get monster vinyl. You could get records of, usually they were old radio shows that were placed on a vinyl album, and listen to your favorite monsters or spook shows that way. Here's our table of contents. I'm not sure which is less convincing, Conga or Reptilicus. Actually, that's not true. Reptilicus is less convincing, but we'll get to that. So what you would get in a magazine like this would be a mix of everything from truly great horror films that were up and current at the time to the bottom of the barrel rubber-suited monster movies. I missed a page there. Exclusive. Mad Monsters brings you the horrifying story of Conga, direct from the monkey's mouth. Michael Gough played the evil scientist in this picture. Somehow he always got cast as a bad guy. Always, always, always. Until he got cast as Alfred in the 1980s and 90s Batman movies. That's about the only time he ever got a chance to play the good guy. So what happens is that this scientist returns from having been lost in the jungle, and he brings back this pet chimpanzee, and he brings back a mysterious growth formula that he's discovered from jungle plants. And he feeds this growth formula to his little chimpanzee, Conga, and Conga grows to become a gigantic gorilla, just the same size as the scientist, and about 200 pounds heavier. Now, I can understand the growth formula made the animal grow, but how did it turn it from a chimpanzee into a gorilla? Shouldn't the growth formula have just made a really big chimpanzee? So something's wrong there, but I guess I'm thinking about it too much. So the scientist hypnotizes Conga to kill for him, and he kills his enemies in the academic and scientific world and some other people that he is not too fond of. And of course, Conga's killing spree rages on. And in the final reel of the film, this is not a spoiler because they show you this right on the poster. In the final reel of the film, there's an overdose of the growth formula, and Conga grows much, much bigger than he was before. And now he's a King Kong-sized gorilla rampaging through the streets of London. Sounds promising, but it's really not that long of a sequence. He's only gigantic for the very end of the movie. And, you know, it's a guy in a suit. They don't have the stop motion effects that the 1933 King Kong had. It's a guy in an ape suit going by a model of Big Ben and being shot at by some fairly unconvincing troops. And that's about it. But if you just can't get enough giant apes, it's worth seeing the movie at least once for that. Really, the best thing about the movie Conga is the performance of Michael Gough. He's over the top as the bad guy in it. It's pretty fun to watch. Okay, this was a common thing in the 60s. They would print a picture from a monster movie or a horror film and then put a funny caption with it, like this. It wasn't the cough that carried her off. It was the coffin they carried her off in. How can a girl sleep with the racket you guys are making? I mean, some of these are somewhat funny. Some of them are just dumb. But, you know, kids would take anything because it was pictures of monsters. Don't slap that board down again. Yeah, that's not so great. This isn't funny at all. This is Boris Karloff in Frankenstein 1970, which, despite the name, was a 1958 movie. My boy, don't give up hope. Yeah, that's not... Yeah. You should see me in the morning. That's... oh, no, you should see me with makeup. Oh, okay. All right. Oh, look, it's Conga again. Okay. These pages have held up pretty well considering how old they are. Oh, I think I missed a page. Yep. Rock and roll in Monsterland. Okay, well, it's 1962, so what do you want? Okay. Advice to the Lovelorn. Gag pieces like this were good page fillers, and, you know, kids didn't think they were hilarious, but they were kind of funny, and, you know, it was something that would flesh out your magazine when you didn't have quite enough articles. Reptilicus was a movie where the poster was better than the entire movie. The poster for Reptilicus, you can look it up online. It's really quite good. It promises way more than the movie delivers. But basically, in Reptilicus, what happens is that miners dig up a piece of a prehistoric reptile. It's just a segment of a tail, but the whole creature regenerates out of the severed piece and is on the rampage as a sort of a venomous spitting serpent. If you ever watched the TV show The Monkees back in the 60s, they used to constantly cut to a picture of Reptilicus from this movie as one of their running gags. Mad Monsters Monsterology Test. How well do you know your monsters? Well, the previous owner of this magazine actually answered some of these for us. So let's start with this one. Showing the young lady that new dance craze, the screaming cha-cha, is your host, and who is it? Is it Neanderthal Man, King Kong's grandson, Ape Man, or our editor? The answer is Neanderthal Man, and as you can see, some kid checked this. Oh, well, got a problem here. You all know Cutie Quasimodo, here portrayed by Lon Chaney Jr., Charles Laughton, James Cagney, Ricky Nelson, who was a pop singer at the time. Well, first of all, Lon Chaney Jr. never played Quasimodo. Lon Chaney Sr. played Quasimodo, and Charles Laughton played Quasimodo. And this is the Charles Laughton presentation. So this was actually a kind of a hard question for a kid, because you wouldn't be wrong to say, oh, Lon Chaney played Quasimodo, but it wasn't Lon Chaney Jr. Look who caught the bride's bouquet. This scene is from, is it The Tree Monster, Bride of Frankenstein, Three's a Crowd, or I Married a Monster from Outer Space? The kid got it right. I Married a Monster from Outer Space. That is that one. If you're at all familiar with these kind of magazines in this era of horror films, I'm sure you recognize Teenage Frankenstein. Anyone can tell that Loverboy is only a kid. In fact, he's just a teenage mummy, Frankenstein, Dracula, beauty parlor operator. Okay. Okay. The kid got one wrong here, I think. To look at Laughing Boy here, you'd never guess he's about to become a vampire, ape, laughing girl, or wolf. Well, the answer is wolf, because this is Michael Landon in I Was a Teenage Werewolf. But the kid has checked vampire. So he got that one wrong. So, original owner of this magazine, if you're out there somewhere, I'm sorry, but you got that one wrong. And then, but if you didn't know the answers, or you didn't care to try to figure it out, you just wanted to read the answers, they do give you an answer key printed upside down. Horror hospitals. Can I help it if my stethoscope's code? I think I've been to a horror hospital. Yeah, I'm not crazy about that. Whoa. The King of Monsters. Remember the playing cards? Remember we saw the Ace of Monsters? There's the King of Monsters. Okay, St. George and the Seven Curses, better known as the Magic Sword. And you may be thinking, well, that's not really a horror movie. You're right, but these magazines did not draw a clear line between horror, fantasy, and science fiction. In fact, Forrest J. Ackerman himself, the co-creator of Famous Monsters of Filmland, the magazine that started all these imitators, he was against categorizing movies separately as science fiction or horror or fantasy, because he felt that it was too confining. And I kind of think he was right. I mean, there are plenty of movies. Think of the movie Alien. You know, that's, I suppose, technically a science fiction movie, but really it's a horror movie that just happens to be in a science fiction setting. That's just one example. Okay. horror comics were a good way to fill out your magazine because you just had to pay the artist. You didn't have to pay a studio that had produced a movie for their copyrighted images. And this being 1962, there were not currently any horror comic books on the stand. There had been some back in the 50s, Tales from the Crypt being the most famous. There were a bunch of them. But by about 1962, there were not. So you would take what you could get. Exposed, the truth about monsters. Oh, man. I'm finally blowing the lid off this whole thing. Okay. Oh. I know this movie. It Came from Hell. It Came from Hell. I only recently saw this one, like recently within the past couple of years. Only recently did I learn about its existence and see it. Okay. Of course, the Wolf Man. The Queen of Monsters. Wow, we got a whole deck of cards going here. Look, mummy, no cavities. Okay. All right, we got a pretty good spread of mummies here. It looks like Lon Chaney Jr. is getting fair representation. This one here, though, is Christopher Lee as the mummy from the Hammer 1959 The Mummy, which gets my vote as the single greatest mummy movie ever made. Better than the Boris Karloff mummy movie, better than the Lon Chaney Jr. mummy movies, although I liked all of those. But if you were only ever going to watch one mummy movie, I would recommend the 1959 Hammer film with Christopher Lee as the mummy and Peter Cushing as the hero. Okay, here we have Lon Chaney Jr. actually got to play all four of the big four classic monsters in different movies. He played the Frankenstein monster, Count Dracula, the Wolfman. He was the only actor that ever played the Wolfman. And he did the Mummy in 3 films. This was the final of the Universal Mummy films, The Mummy's Curse. By the way, do you ever notice, if you're familiar with these movies, you ever notice that the mummy's ghost ends in Massachusetts and the mummy goes down in the swamp? And then in this one, the mummy's curse, when he comes up out of the swamp, all of a sudden they're in the bayou and everyone is Cajun. Did they just not think we would notice the shift of, 1,500 miles? Black Sunday is a really good gothic horror movie. It's Mario Bava at his best. If you've never seen Black Sunday, you can find it easily online. It is dubbed into English, and it is very creepy. It's not to be confused with a similarly titled movie from around the same time, Black Sabbath, which also is a really good movie, but this is Black Sunday. This is a sort of a witchcraft and devilry movie. Nice. You sure had plenty of pictures in this issue. I'm loving it. Oops. Wow, you got a really good spread on this movie. Apparently the Gill Man, creature from the Black Lagoon, is the Jack of Monsters. Okay. Coffin Capers. This is just another version of that bit that we saw earlier in the magazine, where they take pictures from horror movies and put funny captions on them. This is from Conga again. I guess they figured since they were already paying for the rights to use Conga images, they would throw one or two of them in here. I told you we'd be chaperoned by an older couple. Yeah. Okay. All right. Uh-oh. You can tell we're getting to the back. The Mad Monsters Mailman. Here are the ads. You can get devil horns for $1. You can get a snake in a gift box, an ant farm. Lots of rubber masks were sold in the back of these kinds of magazines. Giant rubber iguana. That's nice. Miniature rubber pets. Horrible bloody hand. Disguise kit. Ooh. That's good. I like that. Think you can fool your teachers with that? Rush your order today. But wait, that's not going to be the end of goodies you can order. Monster Madness from Monarch. These are novelizations of current, or at least recent at the time, horror movies. The Brides of Dracula, despite the fact that it says Mark of the Vampire, which is a separate movie. The Brides of Dracula novelization. You can get a Reptilicus novelization. I never even knew there was a Reptilicus novelization. A Gorgo novelization. Gorgo was great. Gorgo is so good that it makes up for Reptilicus for early 60s European kaiju movies. Conga novelization. Jack the Ripper. Okay. I'm going to have to look on eBay now and see if I can score the Gorgo and Conga novelizations. Now I'm interested. Okay, more monster masks. Horrible full head masks with hair. Only $3.98. The Conga Gorilla Bank. A complete magic set. That probably sold well. You can get a toy knife with dripping blood stain. Only $2.98 complete. Or you can get a wiggling bug in a box, insect in an ice cube, spook show in your parlor, a deluxe shrunken head. Whoops, that's fake vomit. A lot of these are stuff you might find out of like a joke shop. Rat puppet with squeaking sound. That's great. Okay, a couple more masks. Rattlesnake. That's nice. I like that. And here's an ad for a sister publication, Horror Monsters. Maybe I'll do a video on an old issue of Horror Monsters at some point, but that was another similar publication. There were lots and lots of these imitators of famous monsters of filmland in the early 60s. Some of them lasted for quite a while, some did not. This one lasted for like 10 issues. This Mad Monsters magazine, this was issue number 1. I think it lasted for about 10 issues. And here at the back, you can see why I got the magazine at a discount, because the back cover has been completely severed in the past and has been reattached. We, the staff of Mad Monsters, salute you. When the werewolf howls, vampires rise, witches scream, and graves open, get your 35 cents ready, and we'll wallow together in gore, ghouls, and gasps. Mad Monsters shall return, unless they catch us first. And they did return for a while. And there you have it. Mad Monsters magazine, issue number 1. Listen, if you're a fan of classic monsters and vintage horror, you would really love my Mourner's Woods book series. I'm self-published on Amazon. I have 6 novels out so far. The next one is already in the works. Different monsters in different books. You don't have to read them in any particular order. And I sell them as cheap as Amazon will let me, 99 cents for an ebook. They're also available in paperback and in audiobook. Thanks for spending time looking at this vintage monster magazine with me. And goodbye for now. I will see you in Mourner's Woods.